What is up? Welcome to a special edition of the PFF podcast. We thought we'd take a look back at the 2016 NFL season that was with a best of. Hope you guys enjoy it.
I think the most important story coming out of this weekend is clearly that the Bills' Super Bowl dream is still alive. They got the win on the board. They're now 1-2. The streak has started. They destroyed the Arizona Cardinals. Clearly my Super Bowl pick is fine. Well, before the season, we talked about potential Stevenson Award winners or Defensive Player of the Year winners, and Aaron Donald was one of the guys that came up, having won the Stevenson Award last year, which is the award we give to the best player in the NFL, period. Our version of the Heisman, except it doesn't just give it to quarterbacks or running backs the whole time. And the basis was that Donald was so good last year. If he does that again this year, he's got a pretty good chance of being in the conversation. But now J.J. Watt has been injured all year and has been shut down for the season. And Aaron Donald, if anything, is playing better this year than he had a year ago, which if he keeps it up would probably be the best single season performance PFF has graded. Are you seeing the same kind of thing as I'm talking about here? Is he even better this year than he was a year ago?
I think he's been definitely better. It's unbelievable just watching him one-on-one. No one ever gets him cleanly. Like, if you're one-on-one with him, you're not going to get him clean. You need double teams, and he will succumb to double teams at times just because he does weigh, 280 some pounds. The guys are bigger, can't get around him. But if you're one-on-one with him, it's just so hard. I think his size actually plays to his advantage, being, around 6 feet tall, being a little undersized. Offensive linemen just have nowhere. There's no strike zone for them to hit with their hands. They can't. You just never see offensive linemen get into his pads and grab him because the space between his pads is so tiny because he's so squatty and so short. He just keeps his body clean again and again and uses his hands to keep fighting. And the pressure he's applying to quarterbacks is unlike anything I've seen from an interior player game after game. It's ridiculous.
So I think for both the Vikings and the Seahawks are teams that would have thought themselves contenders going along, and the Vikings are 2-0, so it's difficult to be too down on them right now. But I think both those offensive lines have to be the thing that prevents them from really succeeding long term this season. The Vikings, we just talked about, it's a disaster. Seattle's line may be even worse than last year, and they're another pretty good example of a team that's been able to win in spite of a bad offensive line for a few seasons. But in order to do that, they've had Marshawn Lynch, they've had Russell Wilson at the peak of his powers. They've been running that read option look, which can kind of, block, if you like, one defender without touching him by zoning him and, reading the guy as opposed to actually assigning a guy to try and block him. But now you've no more Marshawn Lynch. Thomas Rawls went off injured again. You've Russell Wilson, who's already been dinged up with an ankle sprain, I think it is he's got, and the line may be worse than ever before. So suddenly it's finally starting to catch up with him in a serious and meaningful way. Coats and ties only, suits optional, dinner jackets maybe, but if you don't have a tie, you're not getting in, or we're going to have to sit you down for a series. And that's exactly what Ron Rivera and the Carolina Panthers did to their MVP quarterback, because he didn't have a tie on the road trip, the bus trip, I think, or was it the flight to Seattle. So they started Derek Anderson, and Derek Anderson was in there for one play and threw an interception. Granted, it wasn't his fault. He actually hit his receiver in the hands. But still, that went about as... I'd like to think that's the football gods paying Ron Rivera back for such a ridiculous idea. Mike, have you got your shirt and tie?
I do not. I was going to say, I can't even criticize them. I was, trying to think up a funny take on Twitter yesterday, but I couldn't do it because I show up to work in sweatpants every day. Sometimes I don't even put on pants. So, what am I going to say to a guy for not wearing a tie? I haven't worn a tie in, years now. So, I can't hate on him. If it didn't go with the outfit, it didn't go with the outfit, man. I don't know what to say.
That was a good... So, Cam Newton was there doing his press conference in the outfit that he wore on the plane. So the outfit, the incriminating outfit that didn't have the tie, and it was like a turtleneck with a pea coat thing over the top of it and some ridiculous hat that Cam Newton always has a selection of. But he made the point that he couldn't find a shirt in time. It wasn't the tie that was the problem. People were willing to loan him the tie, but he couldn't just put a tie around his polo neck. Though, frankly, if somebody was telling me that if you don't have a tie on, I'm going to sit you down for the first series, I'd have put one on regardless of what I was wearing.
I think usually like a mock turtleneck doubles as a formal, like that usually passes in formal situations. So I can't believe Rivera went all the way out on the limb for that.
Well, that's the thing. So this is what makes no sense whatsoever. A dress code is presumably there for two reasons. One, to make sure everybody looks presentable
Formal.
and isn't just getting on the plane, like we would, just sort of crawled out of bed wearing whatever was closest to hand and then rock up looking like death. And the other thing is, for some discipline and to try and get everyone on the same page, and these little kind of important details in how you do things and how you go about your daily life is what coaches believe makes the difference in tiny increments between winning and losing. But let's assume so the first part of that we dealt with, in that makes no sense at all because Cam Newton looked presentable. Okay, the hat was, ridiculous, but we've come to accept that with Cam Newton. But the rest of him was entirely, smart. This one's a fun one. So there's a bunch of ridiculously old players playing really well right now. So I'm going to go for the geriatric performance of the mid-season so far. Who is the best old player currently kicking ass?
Like you said, there are a handful of guys that are deserving, but I don't think you can look past Terrence Newman for the Vikings, the cornerback, especially considering just how old he is. At 38 years old at cornerback, doing what he's doing. He's one of 3 starting cornerbacks in the league allowing sub 50% completion percentage. That's insane. That's at his age to be playing that well. I don't think this one's a no-brainer to me.
Yeah, I mean, that is genuinely unprecedented. Like in terms of what we have seen over the past decade, there's nobody that has been able to play at anything like that kind of level over at that kind of age. It's ridiculous. There are people who've been in the league for that many years, but those guys were like 3-4 years younger than Terrence Newman at the time. I mean, there's no one that's even close to that level. The other guy that I want to throw out there who just seems entirely ageless is James Harrison, who continues to dominate despite being ridiculous. I mean, how old is he? 1978 he was born. That makes him extremely old because I was 1982 and I'm old.
Yeah.
And he's still kicking ass. Like, he just got 2 sacks against the Ravens, beat up on their offensive tackles. Seems to be getting moved around a little bit more as well now. More of an off-the-ball linebacker, a bit like he was in that Cincinnati Bengals stint he had. And no matter what they ask him to do, he's ridiculous. Why are we late, Mike? What did you
I ate some leftover turkey yesterday for breakfast.
Just how leftover was this leftover turkey?
It was probably about a week old.
Did you? Or
it was
did
probably
you
from
not
last
microwave it? That's
and then I microwaved it.
Yeah,
I did. I microwaved it with some cheese slices over the top of it. It was not my finest moment.
That brings us nicely to this time of the week. Renner's hot take. You went out there last week, really out on a limb, and it was awful. It was really, really bad.
I got some bad feedback on it, and it was a bad take. I mean, it wasn't a great take, but it was hot. This one, I actually already tipped my hand. I kind of already gave it out. I tweeted it out on Saturday, but I think, and it kind of bridges over to college. But I truly believe, and whatever you say here is not going to be able to sway me, that Alabama's defense right now would at least be as good as the Saints' defense a season ago. Fully healthy, if they're fully healthy, for a year, no injuries, just that starting 11 is as good as the Saints' defense was a year ago. Right now, you can't tell me differently.
Let's jump from all the contender-pretender teams to Renner's hot take of the week. What do you got?
I got a hot one this week, and I really can't believe that this hasn't been. I actually, when I came up with it, I had to go and look to see if someone else had come up with the same take because it was so hot that I imagine it coming from somewhere. But here it is. After this season, Dak Prescott should sit out the next 3 years.
What?
For his long-term best interest, is in his long-term best interest to sit out the next 3 years.
How does that make any sense whatsoever?
I'll tell you. So I know what you're thinking. That's crazy. Sitting out 3 years of football.
Yes.
Over that time, in the next 3 years, he's only going to make $1.8 million or so. But $1 million isn't cool. You know what's cool? $1 billion. He will make a $100 million contract after those 3 years. The chances of him having an injury, an ACL, and not being the same like Dante Culpepper, or maybe even a UCL and having Tommy John, or a shoulder injury that messes up his arm, or even the Teddy Bridgewater injury that maybe you can come back from, but you might not be the same player. There's a risk there. There is that kind of inherent risk, and is that risk worth however many million he's going to get over the next year, when he's going to make $100 million as soon as that's up? It's basically the same argument as, a guy sitting out a year of college, except for amplified times 10, because that guy sitting out that year of college might make $5 million. He's going to make $100 million over the course of his career if he, at this point. And he's never going to play with as much talent as he is right now. His stock at this point can only go down in terms of performance. He should sit out 3 years.
But let's wrap up this podcast with our trip to Mike Renner's hot take. What's the hot take this week?
So this is kind of a dated hot take. I was struggling to think of one. I actually think I thought of one Sunday night as I was falling asleep. Can't remember it, though. Didn't remember when I woke up Monday morning. So
you need a pad by the bedside to jot down the hot
I
takes.
do.
We can't let good hot takes escape into the ether because you fell asleep.
It's going to come to me, and it'll be next week's. But mine for this week is kind of a hot take I had during draft season that I'm going to revisit now because it's kind of prescient. Marcus Mariota, Titans quarterback, looks good, promising young career. I still think if you don't know for sure he's the guy, the Titans should have taken a quarterback at number 1 last April, because I think if you don't have a guy with how important a quarterback is to a team, that you can collect 10 extra draft, however many extra draft picks they did collect in that draft, and they could be fine players. That one quarterback, if you think that one of those, Jared Goff, Carson Wentz, is a franchise quarterback, is going to smooth over those, kind of holes in the roster more than not having a quarterback. And I get the argument that drafting a quarterback is going to maybe hinder Mariota's development, might do that. I don't buy into that. I think that, the cream's going to rise to the top, so to speak. So if you have one chance at a franchise quarterback and then you are blessed to get a second chance at a franchise quarterback, you take as many chances as you can get.
Let's move from there straight on to Mike Renner's hot takes. What have you got for this week?
All right, this one's going to be more philosophical hot take and less topical.
Are we keeping track of these? What was last week's one?
It was the Sean Payton won't make it through the season. So okay. We'll check back. We'll circle back on that and see how that goes. But my hot take this week is that the single most important factor for a rookie quarterback's success early on is offensive line play. Having a good offensive line is now, I'm not saying it's the one factor. There's obviously many factors, and head coaching, offense coordinator, that kind of stuff goes into it as well. But I think the most important factor is offensive line play, and not wide receiver play, not head coach, offensive line.
That's going to do it, I think, this week. That's our
my hot take.
Oh, your hot take. I thought that was your double team rant. Have we got a hot take?
Oh, that was close. Okay, so my hot take this week goes back to Jay Ajayi. I'm fully aboard the Ajayi train.
So it seems.
I think I want to get out in front of this one. I want to be the first. You heard it here first. When they play the 49ers in 3 weeks, he's going to break the single game rushing record.
Wow. What is that, 296?
296 from Adrian Peterson back in 2007, which was one of the craziest games in NFL history. That was the same game Cromartie had the 109-yard kick return, I think, set that record. But a crazy game. I think Ajayi, the way the 49ers run defense is atrocious. They are allowing 193 points per game. They're off. The guys up front are just, it's the worst defensive line I've seen in my 4 years of great. They're getting moved, 3 to 4 yards off the ball continuously. I don't see how they have a chance of stopping Ajayi. I think he goes for 300. I think he breaks the 300 mark for the first time in NFL history. Since my somewhat lukewarm take last week fared so well already, the Texans, shut down the Chiefs for the most part. I'll go not as hot as I have in the past and say that this is the year that Sean Payton finally gets the axe in New Orleans. Super Bowl winning coach. They finally part ways.
And there you have it. Thank you so much, guys, for listening all season long. We really appreciate it. Hope you guys enjoyed this season as much as we did. Sam and I will be back next week talking about free agency, off season, a little bit of draft, a little bit of everything. We'll talk to you guys then.